This is the Bayeaux Tapestry, and it is one of the most famous pieces that came out of what's called Norman England. And it is actually not a tapestry, which is interesting. A tapestry is like when we talked about the artable carpet, where you make knots and you're building like this big, thick, like it's this big thick rug basically. But this one is not actually a tapestry. This is embroidered wool on linen, and it's about 20 inches in height, but it is 230 feet in length. So it's very long, and it contains, there's about 50 scenes that survive today, but there were much more originally. And one of the reasons why it was called the Bayeaux Tapestry is because it is housed in the Bayeaux Cathedral, and that's because one of the people who commissioned it was William the Conqueror's half brother, and so he was the bishop of I think it's the Bishop of Odo, but and so it's still in Bayeux today, which is in Normandy, France. So elaborate textiles like this to commission it would enhance the noble's status, and were a necessary feature of the lifestyle of this time period in both in castles and palaces. And it represents the secular art that would have been part of most royal courts. So remember, secular means non-religious art. And this particular embroidery is one of the earliest to have survived. And it is a narrative. So that's something that's really significant about it, is that it's telling a story throughout the 230 feet of this tapestry. And it is the story of the Norman invasion of England from the Norman perspective. And it tells the details that first lead up to William's of Normandy, of his invasion of England in 1066. And even though it's from their perspective, the style suggests it was created by Anglo-Saxons. So to give you a little background of the invasion of Normandy, the year is 1066, is when it's one of the most important years in British history. And that is when, after the previous king had died, the last Anglo-Saxon king, his name was Edward the Confessor, and he died without an heir. And there was the next person in line to the throne was, his name was Alfred, and he was like his brother-in-law's son or some kind of obscure relation. And then he also had this relation to William of Normandy, who actually was a bastard, meaning he was not married within the confines of marriage. And so he's alternately known as not just as William the Conqueror, but as William the Bastard. So the Bayeaux Tapestry originally contained 75 scenes, and it had Latin inscriptions that would depict the events that led up to the Norman conquest, and then culminating in the Battle of Hastings in 1066. So, as I said before, most of it's missing, and the last part is missing, which would have probably been the coronation of William as the King of England. And although it is a commemorative work, it's something that can be viewed as a type of a chronicle. However, there are certain inclusions of different episodes that don't necessarily relate to historic events. So these types of things would be like the party that they had the night before the invasion, or the death scenes, or the battle scenes. Some of these, there are also random scenes that don't contribute to the narrative. So it just adds to the story of William taking over of England. So it is a rich representation of a particular historical moment, and it provides visual evidence of what not only 11th century textiles were like, but it also gives us this view of what people wore in the 11th century, the type of weapons that they used, and what was expected of them um, in battle. So this was probably made in Canterbury around the year 1070, so about 4 years after the victory of the Normans over the Anglo-Saxons, and it's considered to be a somewhat accurate representation of events. And again, remember, our historians say that, the victors are the ones who write history, or all historians say that. And so, we're really seeing, it's from the perspective of the winners. And so we're seeing that this tapestry favorably depicts the Normans in the events leading up to the Battle of Hastings, and it is definitely from the Norman point of view. So Bishop of Bayeaux was Odo, and he was the half-brother of William, and he actually appears in several scenes of the tapestry, and we know when he appears because there is actually the Latin for his name. And although he's only mentioned briefly in, certain sources, by the Middle Ages, the tapestry was going to be much more important than and much bigger than the person who commissioned it. So by the late Middle Ages, the tapestry is displayed in the Bayeaux Cathedral, which was built by Odo and dedicated in 1077. But its size and secular subject matter suggests that it may have been intended to be a secular hanging, perhaps maybe in Odo's wall. We don't know the identity of the artist who produced this tapestry. The idea is maybe it was designed by men, but then they employed quality needlework that is probably from the Anglo-Saxon embroiderers who were well known for their needlework at the time in Europe. And they're going to depict stylistic scenes that are believed to have been adapted from images from illuminated manuscripts at Canterbury. So the artist skillfully organizes the composition of the tapestry to lead the viewer's eye from one scene to the next, and to divide the compositional space into 3 horizontal zones. And we can see that here with the main ideas in the middle, and then we have something going on the top and then also on the bottom. So the main story is in the middle, or the larger middle zone. The upper zone and the lower zone contains images of animals and people. Could be scenes from Aesop's fables or scenes of husbandry and hunting. And at the time, the images in the borders interact with and draw attention to key moments in the narrative. So this is a continuous narrative similar to Trajan's column, and then the subject matter of the tapestry actually has a lot in common with the decoration of Trajan's column. So it's has more in common with Trajan's column than it does with some of the other things, because the other traditions at the time would have been manuscripts in scroll form, and they would have been focused more on mythic rather than historical references. So the embroiderers' attention to specific details provided important sources for 11th century life, even including the meal that took place from the Normans before reaching the shore of England. So we see dining practices, and also we see examples of armor used in the period and battle preparations, servants preparing food over the fire and baking bread. So, we're seeing a lot of things that are happening throughout this. Also, William and his half-brothers Odo and Robert meet for a war council at some point in this. There's also arrows that were seen as a crucial ammunition, which shed light on military provisions and tactics of the time. There's also, this is the cavalry scene, and the cavalry would quickly advance and easily retreat, and that would scatter an opponent's defenses. It was a strong tactic that was flexible, intimidating, and although foot soldiers are included in the tapestry, the cavalry commands this scene, and it gives this impression that the Normans were a cavalry-dominated army. So the Bayeaux Tapestry provides an excellent example of Anglo-Norman art, serves as a medieval artifact that operates as art, chronicle, and even a political agenda. And so the next thing I'm going to show you guys is actually kind of like this animated visual of the Bayeaux Tapestry. So it goes through each scene as we know it today. One other historical reference, just to take note of, is that the Norman invasion of England is the last time that the island of Britain has been successfully invaded since 1066. So it's a very significant date for the British. Okay, I know that was kind of an interesting animation, but it gives you the idea of what this narration was meant to do. So that is the Bayeaux Tapestry, and that's it for this piece.